Hi guys, I want to talk about stances in the Pekiti Tirsia system. When I first learned, our basic stance was seated on the back leg, front leg is extremely light, barely touching the ground, and the tip of the weapon is towards the opponent, and we're actually kind of using the top edge there as a front sight, aiming it right towards the target, tire, heavy bag, whatever in those days. And we would do this as a visual indexing point. So you're having that tip in your visual field between you and the target. This gives you more accuracy because you still have that straight line there and you have good accuracy in your strike. What you're trying to do in the beginning here is simply learn accuracy and coordination. Remember, you're usually starting this as a kid in the Philippines, a young boy, 7, 8 years old, whatever. I started at 14, still relatively young. So you're growing into the technique. When we started training in advanced material, we started with Sagitas on this. We took this stance, we kind of roughly called it our advanced stance because we're learning advanced material, and the weight was more evenly distributed, 50-50 between the feet. If there was a little bias, it was slightly to the front, let's say 60-40 roughly, and we're using the butt of the Baston as our front sight, and that gives you a lot of accuracy. It also teaches you to use the left hand as a secondary index point. You're touching the weapon. I'm also touching the baton to my left shoulder, and your brain is judging the distance between all these reference points. The tip of the butt of the stick to the target, my right hand to the target, my left hand to the target, my left shoulder to the target. So I'm getting all this input to calculate a good and accurate distance from myself to the target. This also allows you to lever with the left hand to overcome the inertia of the weapon. Now, a lightweight rattan, you don't really have too much of that problem, but you start getting to heavier weapons like swords or even fighting weight hardwood sticks. That extra leverage can give you more speed in your delivery. Okay, now, when we started doing a spotted dagger, it was quite common for us to load a single-edged sword. This is a plastic mock-up of I think a Scottish basket hilt broadsword or something. Either loading it up on our forearm if it's single edge, or if we had a dagger with a good crossguard on it, we'd actually load it up on the crossguard. And the reason for that is to help overcome the inertia of the sword. If you have an actual full weight heavy sword, yeah, you may be able to swing it fast, but getting it off a stationary position, overcoming that inertia, you'll have more speed if you can have that left hand help you a bit. I was explaining to one of the guys recently, you have leverage, right? And a lever is you take a shaft and you put it on a fulcrum, let's say a rock, and you have, if you have that point right in the middle where the fulcrum is, you press 100 pounds down on that end, and the other end will raise up with 100 pounds of force. However, if you put it, let's say it's 75% mark, you put you only need 25 pounds, let's say my right hand pushing down to lift up with 100 pounds, right? So that's how you use leverage to get force, strength. This is true with speed. If I put the fulcrum in the center, I go down 100 miles per hour on my right hand, the tip towards my left will go up 100 miles an hour. However, if I move it to the 25% point, let's say, if I move my right hand down 25 miles an hour, then that tip is going to go 100 miles an hour, getting the math right. But the idea is where you put the fulcrum helps develop the speed. You guys old enough to remember old phonograph record. The center is moving slower than the let's try spinning this here. The center is moving slower than the tip because the center doesn't have to travel as far. The tip is moving during the same time period over a longer distance, therefore the tip is moving faster. So you get to use that by adding a fulcrum in your, in this case, my left hand work. Now, you can multiply that by using a moving fulcrum. If I have the fulcrum in the 50% point, but I move it upwards at a certain speed, I'm now multiplying the downward speed of my right hand with the upward speed of the fulcrum, and I'm getting tip speed faster than it would be if I used a stationary fulcrum. So, the reason for that big long speech is you'll see us load up very often with the weapon side back and the weapon back spine of the weapon rests against the forearm or against the blade. And when you see us do this, this is like simulating a cross guard, so that we can go and get that, overcome the inertia of the weapon, of the bigger weapon, and use that fulcrum, and especially a moving fulcrum, to get more speed. So the advanced stance, commonly used with swords and longer weapons of Pekiti Tirsia, has the sword in the right hand. Would be considered a short sword because Tirsia, it's a little short on me. But the idea is the blade would be 1 cubit in length, elbow to fingertip. This one's just a hair short, but we'll use it here. This is still long enough to cover my left hand when I grip my wrist to protect my wrist with my weapon side wrist with my left hand. I have a knuckle guard here. I have the shaft, or the blade length extending past my forearm. It's guarding against a forehand cut, which is the most common first cut of a fight. So I have essentially a built-in umbrella or roof block here, and then I can cut from there. When we got into knife training at Pekiti Tirsia, it was in New York, and Tuan Guy basically started us with the size blade that was legal for us to carry, which would be a 4-inch pocket knife. So we started off in ice pick grip with the edge in, because that's the most effective grip for this size blade and a single edge knife. It's not that that's the best grip for defending yourself with a knife of any size. It's that this is the best grip for this size, specific size tool. So essentially our stance was like a boxing guard. You want the hands fairly high up. You know, a boxer's going to have his hands low so he can see over his gloves, but he's not worried about getting stabbed in the eye. We are, so our guard is fairly high up. This also helps with gravity because most of your counter is going to be dropping down. It gives you one choice to do, 99% of the time. His attack is going to be below your hand, so that gives you one choice. If you have one choice majority of the time, you're going to be faster. The edge is in, because with a short blade like that, unless you have a karambit, something with a hook on it, you're really not going to get a great cut, pushing forward with that edge. But you can find it useful for hooking in. In terms of which leg is forward, as a general rule of thumb, we would have the weapon side back if we had fighting someone with the same grip, and we would have weapon side forward this way if we had someone with a different grip. Say someone's in hammer grip and I need to overcome his reach advantage, then I would try to nullify that somewhat by having my weapon side forward, and we would do a lot of jabs to counter his arm as it comes in, trying to play sniper on it and shoot that out of the air before it got close enough to do damage to us. So if we go into another side blade, okay guys, here you see a cold steel OSI knife that's sold as a fighting knife. The original one had a sub hilt on it. Over here there was another little guard where you put your finger on, and there was a cross guard back here. I use this as a kitchen camping knife. So I have my thumb, I want my ability to put my thumb on the back here. And I found that those sub hilts either work or they don't. They didn't work for my big hands. So let's cut that off. The reason I'm mentioning this is a size that my teacher would utilize as a fighting knife in hammer grip. It's about 1 hand in blade length. So something like this, wow, this is a big knife. You know, yeah, it's a big lightweight knife. If I cut someone with this and I cut them, let's say, right against the edge here of the forearm, I'll cut down to the bone. But if I'm hitting the edge of the forearm here, all I'm really getting is skin and bone. It'll hurt probably afterwards. Won't hurt during the fight if the adrenaline's up. And it's really not going to do a lot of damage to the guy. Not enough to stop him right now in the fight. Yeah, if I cut, say, inside of the forearm, yeah. Outside of the forearm, maybe not enough. So the way he would use this is having a guard here and parrying with the left hand, using a lot of work with the left hand. If I have someone with a similar size blade, let's say a K-bar, and this is how we used to use K-bars in the old days, and parry and do the work with this blade, mostly thrusting, not so much slashing. If we slashed, it was a distraction across the forehead to get him to bleed into his eyes, but we're not looking at that as a fight finisher. And we would not use something this size in ice pick grip. The idea here is, I don't want something, probably something a little small, let me put it in the sheath. I don't want something so long in ice pick grip that I might cut my own hand as I'm maneuvering across. So our total blade length on ice pick grip was very often thumb to fingertip, or pinky tip, which is like 9 or 10 inches. So something like this cold steel counterpoint 1 is something I would use in ice pick grip because I'm not going to cut myself. So here's a good example of two blades and when would you use each. This short blade I would use in ice pick grip. This longer blade I would use in hammer grip, reinforced with the thumb because it's lightweight. I can't, like my teacher's rationale was, unless you can break his bones with a cut, you really don't want to rely on just hacking to get the job done. It's not a fight stopper to a weapon arm. So we'll reinforce this with a thumb. So if we do need to slash against the forehead, we can get a good cut on there. But we finish up the finishers are really the thrust with this size weapon. So this is how we would use or choose to use different grips with these size weapons. We start off with ice pick grip because those are the blades that were legal for us to carry in New York when he was first teaching. But it's not that we prefer ice pick grip. We prefer ice pick grip with this size blade, prefer hammer grip with this size blade. Okay, all this summer I've been working on refining what I've been teaching the last few years, which is how to use different blades that you'd actually carry that don't fall into either the knife category or the sword category. So big blades like Bowie knives, Kukri and axes or hatchets, tomahawks, things of that in-between category. So I start off with a lightweight Bowie knife. This is a knockoff of a Coldsteel Trailmaster. The Trailmaster weighs about, I think 1 ounce over a pound, 17 ounces, and maybe a little bit of change. So how I teach this is from that high guard we use with our knives. Again, if you hold your knife in a middle stance, that means that the person can attack you above your blade or below your blade. If you have two choices to make, it takes twice as long as if he's going to attack me below my blade, and then I got one simple thing to think about under stress, so I'll react quicker. So guard is up. Another reason you want to have a high guard is if I need to pull this back out of the way if he's cutting me and maybe parry with my left hand or whatever against his arm, I pull back instinctively. I'm not going to stab myself in the face. If I have a middle stance with this and he pulls back, unless I pull directly back, if I snap back like this, I don't want that tip anywhere near my face. Where if I have a high guard and I need to pull this back, say for instance I'm parrying an arm out of the way, I'm less likely to pop myself with this blade. So one of the things I do is I actually have people bring it up high and then make sure, and I say knock your head off, make sure you have enough height here that it's not going to hit your head. Because you may pull straight back, you may wind it this way or that way. So you have enough height there so that, one, you have a decision to make. Okay, it's coming in, it's probably something below my weapon, easier for me to make that decision under stress. Two, if I move this away, I'm not going to stab myself. And I can reach out with this weapon side forward because it's a lighter blade. I'm dealing with the opponent at a distance. I deliberately picked up this Ontario SP10 Raider Bowie because it's heavy. It's very similar to the early American Bowies from the time of Jim Bowie, even before. They had this style way before. And up until maybe the Civil War era, basically when you had repeating pistols and reliable repeating revolvers, they didn't rely on the knife as their main defense. It was a secondary weapon. But this is very indicative of those early 19th century Bowies. Thick spine, this is a 1/4 inch. You have the clip point, the swedge here. They would sharpen the swedge. So when you're hitting with this, you can block with the spine against the opponent's blade and not hurt your cutting edge. That sharpened swedge, especially with that slight curvature to it, almost acts like a karambit going in. You get good penetration with that point. So there's some advantages to this. That's how Bowie's supposed to fight. So I said, let's try this. We'll play with it and kind of experience that idea, my idea of that early American fighting style. So from here, I'll teach this with the close quarter set, which is a little tighter stance with the weapon side back and using double force to help overcome the inertia of that blade. Because this is so heavy, I like to have double force, one, to hit with more power on that, but two, to keep more control over the blade. If you have, a tendency is when you swing forehand into tertia to let that spine of the blade stop on your left side or offside deltoid. If you do that with a Bowie knife, with a short knife, but something short and heavy like this, it's too easy to come and have that come into your arm. Even if you were using it cutting edge forward, that point is right in line for your deltoid. You don't want to stab yourself in the nerves and the deltoid, obviously. So I like to use this double force with that left hand acting as a reinforcement for power and to give you extra control, acts as a buffer, so you don't have that cutting edge coming into you. And you'll notice this a lot on double-edged swords in general. There's a tendency to use double-edged swords, except for things like, mainly thrusting swords like rapiers. But for the rest of the time, double-edged swords tend to be used with a shield in this hand. When you don't have a shield in this hand, it makes sense to have two hands on the weapon, either with a long two-hand grip for control, or what you'll see sometimes in the Philippines with a double edge, very often if they don't have a shield, they'll use double force because that gives you that same level of control. You're not likely to cut yourself with the back edge of the blade if you have your grip in double force, at least less likely to cut yourself. So that's how we're using a heavy Bowie, weapon side back, and fighting with double force. Okay, when I teach work with the Kukri, we have that same distinction between heavy and light. With a light blade, I'll have weapon side forward, a little more extension with the blade than a boxer stance and tight. If you can see, there's kind of a balance point you'll feel here where too close and you're not engaging your bicep and it's a little loose in here and you don't have that control. Too far and that heavy blade is starting to sink on you. This one's not too heavy, but you get the idea. So you'll find a balance point. For me, it's roughly 45 degrees. Your mileage may vary. And again, I want that high guard so that I don't hit myself in the head with the blade. I don't pop myself in the face if it's too low. So if I need to move this out of the way, sidestep and countercut, I'm not likely to hit myself in the face with this blade. High guard so that likely attacks are going to be under your weapon, so you have a better likelihood or less things to think about under stress. He's coming under my hand or at my hand, but no higher than my hand, and it's either going to be, central line, right or left. It's pretty easy decisions, or less decisions than if you're holding it midpoint. Okay, here we have the cold steel Gurkha Kukri Plus. The plus means it has a little guard over here. The Ontario weighs about 1 pound. This weighs about 1.5 pounds. So I'll use this weapon side back. I could take it in the basic stance here, but what's nice about the Kukri, when you start getting the blades this long, these usually 12 or 13 inches, most Kukris I've seen, you get to the point where you can hold this in an advanced stance and use that blade as a guard for your left arm. So I'll hold it here. I'll use a pommel as the front sight, and I've seen that the Gurkhas sometimes start their fight from here if they're not drawing and cutting directly from the scabbard. They'll sometimes do their guards right from here. So it makes a lot of sense for me. You're guarding against that forehand cut from the opponent. You have a built-in, what we call an umbrella or roof block in there. And you can use that pommel, or because it's a shorter weapon, even on the Kukri Plus, I've even used the guard over here as my front sight. And that's been helping my accuracy using this tool. So it's interesting. So I'll have weapon side back because it's a heavier weapon. And we'll fight with this from side steps and double force. And the idea being, this is so heavy I want control over this. As a single-edged weapon, you don't have to worry about cutting my arm on the backhand side, but I still want control over this. Say I'm doing a horizontal to the head, I don't want to smack myself in the head, with this 1.5 pound piece of steel on the recovery from a forehand. So if I can control that with my left hand, for my countercuts and control on the backhand side, there's an advantage to that. I'm using weapon side back because this is a heavy blade. I don't want to extend out too far with that, because one, there's more inertia to overcome with a heavier blade, and two, I'm kind of setting these up as this is what you would do in close quarter work. So you're God forbid, a melee in a close environment, deal with it from here, so you're covering your neck and head and doing your cuts from there. So interesting idea. There's a balance point between, you might start off here in basics, take it advanced from here. You'll see in the Learning Through Comparisons video, I'll end a lot of the individual combinations going to this stance for that reason, to keep your options open. So this is how I would use a heavy Kukri. Really from this stance would be my go-to. When it comes to tomahawks, what I've been working with is 3 different versions. So we have a light one-hand tomahawk. We have a heavy axe. This is a Hatchet from Baston. I really like these for camping. And then we have, there's a cold steel trail hawk. This is something you could use either one-handed or two-handed, and another great versatile camping tool. So, because this has a spike on it, you have to do things differently. This is the SOG Fast Hawk. Very, very popular. It's a nice throwing hawk, and it's based on the Vietnam War era Peter Laguna Tomahawk for Special Forces. And then in my other videos, you see the advantages to this blade shape. But You have this, anytime you have a hawk with a spike on it, that thing is a danger to you. You swing, and you don't want to pull that back as you could in learning a Philippine martial arts. Oh, it's no big deal if I touch my left shoulder with this stick. It's a big problem if you hit yourself in the left shoulder with that spike. So again, we're weapon side, either forward or back, depending on what the other person has. Generally, I'm treating this like a knife. If he has a similar length weapon, then I want to use my left hand maybe to help parry things out of the way and use this more like a cross, so it's more of a jab and cross scenario. However, if he has a different weapon and I'm on a reach disadvantage, I might use this with the weapon side forward. And this is so light, I can spin this with control and keep it far away from me. I'm not going to pull back and hit myself if I have weapon side forward on this. When we go to the heavy Eskiming hatchet, you know, the spine back here is more than a ½ inch thick. This thing weighs about 1.5 pounds, similar to the bigger Kukri or Bowies. I'm teaching this weapon side back and use it with double force to keep control over that thing. And again, I'm not so worried about hitting myself in the shoulder with that flat pole, but what if I'm doing a horizontal? I definitely don't want to get hit in the head with this thing in the back here. And we'll do things where you are actually hooking with this pole, but we come back to that left hand as a guard to protect us from getting hit by this. You know, you got 1.5 pound steel brass knuckles basically with these things. So because it's a heavy weapon, I tend to teach this weapon side back and using double force as much as possible. When I say that, you don't want to be locked in slavishly to holding that left hand there all the time, because you may need to use it as a parrying or a blocking arm. And then sometimes after you deliver a stroke, you may want to release because you don't want to have your left arm dragging you back out of a good visual field of the opponent. So what I'm trying to say by all these things is you need to have that mental flexibility as well as physical flexibility to know when you should use a technique you learn and when you need to modify it. So but what's nice about these is you can use this, you know, two-handed or one-handed. The difference in speed there is really on that return of the one-hand stroke. So these function a little bit like a hand-and-a-half sword, or what they would call the bastard sword in the Middle Ages. And the idea is you could use this two-handed effectively, or you could use it one-handed effectively. And this is just barely long enough that I can get two hands on it, and it's worth putting two hands on it. So what I'm trying to do with this whole series, learning through comparisons and this video here, is try to encourage you to have that mental flexibility. Don't lock things in stone. This is what my teacher taught me on this weapon. Therefore, that's how I use all weapons, no matter how different they are in size, length, weight, other physical features. So please, have that flexibility, guys. Think for yourself, analyze for yourself, learn how to problem solve and say, what's the best way to use that particular weapon in this particular situation? Thank you.